Hi and thanks for tuning in. In this video I want to show you how to plant up a plant pot with tulip bulbs for flowering next season. So what's really important when you come to actually choose the tulip bulbs is to go for something that looks healthy, it feels firm. If there's any sort of hint of mustiness about the bulbs when you come to buy them or any sign of mould, just ditch them. Because the problem is if you then use a mouldy bulb planted into a pot with healthy bulbs, the mould just spreads. So basically just go for nice, healthy, fresh bulbs. So the next stage is to think about the container you're going to use, and in this instance I'm going to use a very simple plain terracotta pot. And with all containers, when you come to plant them, you really just have to think about the drainage, because plant bulbs in their dormant stage, before they actually get growing, will just rot off if they get too wet. So the simplest thing to use is either bits of broken pot or large pieces of stone, which you just place in the bottom of the container, covering that drainage hole or holes at the base of the pot. And what all that does is it stops the holes blocking up and preventing the water from draining through. And this is the really important bit, because when you start to fill the container with compost, you want to do it so that you fill the pot to round about halfway up the sides of the plant pot, and that's going to be your first layer, because the key to this whole process in creating a really beautiful, fantastic display is to do a double layer of the bulbs, because what that does is it means it puts more bulbs into the pot, but also it sort of staggers the heights of them and you get a really full, almost bouquet when they come to start to flower. So using a basic compost, it doesn't have to be anything fancy, and it also doesn't have to have food in it, because the bulbs will produce their own food once they get growing. So that's lightly covering the terracotta pieces in the bottom of the pot, and I'm going to take that first little bit more. I'm going to take the first layer of bulbs and lay them on the surface of the compost. Now it might sound obvious when I say it now, but just try and make sure that they're pointing the right way up. With tulips it is easy because there's a little pointy tip to them, that's the growing point. So when you put them on the surface of the compost, make sure they are in fact pointing upwards. And I've got a bag here with 50 bulbs in. I'm going to do a layer of 25 first, cover it with some compost, and then put the other layer on top of it, and then fill up the remaining space with the compost. Okay, so now I've done the first layer, I'm going to take some more compost and place it on that layer of bulbs to do a second layer. So you can see that the bulbs are really quite tightly packed together. So don't be afraid that you are cramming them in, because in fact cramming them in is the key to creating that beautiful display that you're looking for. So now that second layer is in, I'm going to take the remaining space will be covered with compost, filling it close to the surface of the top of the pot, but not overfilling it so that when it does rain or get wet, that the compost spills out over the sides of the pot. And I hope you notice throughout this whole process that I've not been jamming the compost down either. It's about leaving the whole thing relatively light, so that once again the water can just move through the pot, which it wouldn't do if you were jamming the soil in. And there we go. So our finished pot. Now when it comes to choosing the tulip that you put in your pot, just bear in mind that some tulips get much larger than others. So for the tallest ones you'll need quite a substantial pot, because they will need that kind of volume of soil to help support them. And the opposite is true. Some of the very small tulips don't want to be drowning in compost, so just work on the basis that the tulip you're going to put in this pot is the right kind of size ultimately. I'm going for a tulip here called Evergreen, which is a beautiful greeny coloured flower with a margin of yellow just to the outside of the petals. So you've got the name. Make sure you label up the pots once they've gone in the compost, because when they start emerging in the spring you won't know what they are until of course they're in full flower, and you've got a few pots and you've got a sort of an area that you want them to go in. It'll just avoid confusion and getting them muddled. And then the next thing just to bear in mind and think about is where this pot goes. Now, in an ideal world, it's not going to go and sit out in the rain for the next few weeks. What I'll do is I'll put these under cover. They're in the open, but it just means that they don't get the worst of the rain on them. And the minute you start seeing signs of life, which quite often can actually be roots coming through the bottom of the pot, that's the signal that they're going to start needing water. And when you do put them under cover to keep out the rain, just bear in mind that Mr. and Mrs. Mouse are very fond of tulip bulbs during the depths of winter. So just keep an eye out for little craters being created in the compost. And if you do find that that's becoming a problem, get something like chicken wire, just fix it over the top of the pot, and that should hopefully stop any of that being a problem for you. So obviously at this time of year you have to use your imagination as to what this is going to look like in the spring, but to make sure you don't miss out how good this evergreen tulip bulb is going to look, hit the subscribe button and you'll be guaranteed not to miss it next year.